The debate over whether the Trump administration can legally and effectively implement RIFs during a government shutdown has intensified. The White House is pushing for a more aggressive strategy than usual to address potential government shutdowns, as a Wednesday night memo instructed agencies to plan for further staff reductions if funding lapses occur early next week. However, with just days left before a shutdown, many question whether agencies can even begin drafting RIF plans, given the complexity and time required for such processes. https://federalnewsnetwork.com Workforce 2025-02 RIFs are a complicated, time-consuming process for agencies, experts say. This tension between urgency and practicality is at the heart of the current debate. A new OMB memo, first reported by Politico, marks a significant shift in the administration's approach. Earlier this year, the Trump administration directed agencies to conduct RIFs and reduce employee headcounts, focusing on eliminating non-statutory functions. https://www.opm.gov/chcoc/latest memos/guidance on agency RIF and reorganization plans requested by implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency Workforce Optimization Initiative.pdf. Over the past few months, agencies have already scaled back staffing levels, with an estimated 200,000 federal workers leaving their roles this year. Officials predict a 300,000 employee reduction by year-end. Not all agencies have followed through. At the IRS, for example, officials walked back their staffing cuts after realizing the reductions were too drastic. https://federalnewsnetwork.com/workforce 2025-08 IRS plans to rescind some deferred resignation offers to fill critical vacancies. Similarly, the General Services Administration reversed its mass layoffs of federal buildings workforce. federalnewsnetwork.com/federalnews2509 The GSA walks back mass layoffs of its federal buildings workforce. This inconsistency highlights the challenges of balancing fiscal constraints with operational needs. The OMB now urges agencies to consider even deeper RIFs, particularly for employees in programs facing funding lapses next week, those whose missions aren't otherwise funded or whose work doesn't align with the administration's priorities. The memo also mandates that RIF notices be sent to all affected employees, regardless of whether they're classified as accepted or furloughed. federalnewsnetwork.com/federal buildings workforce. Some walks back mass layoffs of its federal buildings workforce. If a shutdown is avoided, the OMB says agencies don't need to proceed with additional RIFs, but still encourages them. However, former OMB official Bobby Kogan, currently a senior director at the Center for American Progress, casts doubt on the feasibility of last-minute RIFs. He argues that conducting such measures during a shutdown, whether before or after, would likely be illegal and impractical. It doesn't seem to me that they would really be able to legally do that additional work during a shutdown, he said. And it doesn't seem to me that they'd be able to get it all done beforehand. This skepticism raises questions about whether the administration was planning these cuts all along or using the shutdown as a pretext. Despite these concerns, certain activities continue during a shutdown, including those funded outside congressional appropriations, as long as they're explicitly authorized by law or deemed necessary to protect against imminent threats to life or property. https://www.cbpp.org/research understanding the legal framework governing a shutdown. However, the interpretation of what can or cannot continue during a shutdown remains ambiguous. Different administrations have interpreted these exceptions more or less narrowly, said the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. The first Trump administration took a more expansive view of public services that should continue. But Kogan counters, you can't really say that preparing to fire people is necessary for protecting against imminent threats to life and property. As the OMB directive on RIFs becomes unprecedented, the process of implementing these cuts during a shutdown remains uncertain. Although a RIF may ultimately not happen during a shutdown, agencies would presumably have lists of employees they think could be subject to a future RIF, said Jenny Mattingly, Vice President of Government Affairs at the Partnership for Public Service, Unfortunately, this continues the administration's trend of making personnel decisions at a speed that neglects to account for the work Congress has authorized, the services Americans rely on, or the strategic staffing needs of agencies. Democratic lawmakers argue that the Trump administration has no legal grounds to direct further RIFs during a shutdown. Senator Chris Van Hollen, D-Med, called the OMB memo mafia-style blackmail, saying, "These dedicated workers have nothing to do with the ongoing political and policy disputes that have brought us to the brink of a shutdown." Representative James Walkinshaw, DVA, added, "A shutdown gives the administration no additional legal authority to fire or RIF federal employees." If you'd like to contact this reporter about recent changes in the federal government, please email drew.friedman@federalnewsnetwork.com or reach out on Signal at drewfriedman.11. Copyright 2025, Federal News Network. All rights reserved. This website is not intended for users located within the European Economic Area.